Hi, and welcome to the Christian Gamer channel. I'm Paul, and I'm using this space to share my insights from the Bible. I want to be clear right up front. I don't claim to have any special authority. I'm not a pastor, a theologian, an apostle, or anything special. I'm just an ordinary person who reads their Bible and wants to share what I've learned with the wider community. Because of that, your personal insights are absolutely no less valid than mine. I strongly urge you to join the conversation. If you disagree with anything I've said, or if you want to add something you think I've missed or glossed over, you are actively encouraged to do so. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments or even share a link to your own video. I know sharing biblical insights can be intimidating, especially in an age where simply trying to tell the truth can risk persecution or the fear of it down the road. But remember, God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but of power and love and self-control. So let's not be afraid to stand firm and share our faith and insights with courage. Okay, let's do this. And on this day 22 of Advent, we'll be looking at Isaiah 53 verse 9 and talking about the burial of Jesus. In the King James Version we read, "And he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth." And in the English Standard Version, "And they made his grave with the wicked, and with a rich man in his death, although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth." And the New International Version reads, "He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth." So interpretations of Isaiah 53:9, which describes the burial of the suffering servant, vary significantly across historical periods. While early Jewish texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls provide unique linguistic insights, the Talmud and later rabbinic literature reflect a shift from individual, often messianic, interpretations to a collective national interpretation, Israel in exile. So the great Isaiah scroll, 1 Qumran Isaiah Fragment A, dating to roughly 125 before Christ, is the most famous Dead Sea Scrolls manuscript containing this passage. It offers a slightly different reading than the standard Masoretic text. While the Masoretic text says "in his death," or plural bemotav, the Dead Sea Scrolls reads "his tomb," or "his high place," Bamotaph. Some scholars argue the Dead Sea Scrolls spelling implies his body, Bamoto, was with a rich man. These variants emphasize the physical reality of the servant's burial. At Qumran, the community often saw themselves as the servant figure collectively, though some fragments like 4 Qumran 491 Fragment C suggest an individual self-glorification hymn that uses similar language for a teacher or messianic leader. So in his deaths versus in his tomb or in his death. So the Masoretic text reads, and you'll excuse my abysmal Hebrew, Vayitien et reshaim ki ro v'et ashir bimotav al lokamas asar velo mirmav bifiv. And he, or they, gave his grave with the wicked, and with a rich man in his deaths, which is plural, because he had done no violence, and no deceit was in his mouth. And the Dead Sea Scrolls reads pretty much the same, except the key word that in the Masoretic text is bimotav becomes bimauto, and that changes the meaning, and they made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his tomb or his high place, because he did no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. So possible reasons for the difference: the poetic parallelism theory or scribal smoothing. In Hebrew poetry, lines usually come in pairs or parallelism. The first half, and they made his grave, kivito, kiviro, that's a resh, kiviro, and the second half, with the rich in his tomb or high place, bamato. Many scholars believe the original word was tomb. However, because the word bama usually means a pagan high place, idolatrous altar, later scribes may have found it confusing or religiously offensive to associate the servant with an idol altar. They may have corrected it to the similar sounding word for death. Now, the collective theory or intentional pluralization. As Jewish interpretation shifted towards seeing the servant as the nation of Israel, the singular death became problematic. By adding the yod to make it deaths, bimotav, the Masoretes, or the traditions they inherited, could emphasize that the passage refers to the many deaths of the Jewish people throughout exile. Then there's the Aramaic influence theory. During the period between the Dead Sea Scrolls, roughly 125 before the Common Era, and the Masoretes, roughly 900 in the Common Era, Aramaic became the dominant language of Jewish scholarship. Some linguistic shifts in how vowels were represented with consonants, the use of Mater's lectionis, might have led a later scribe to insert a yod to clarify a pronunciation that eventually became fixed as a plural. Mater's lectionis is Latin for mothers of reading. They are consonants that hint at vowel sounds. We have something similar in English, as the letter Y is a consonant, but in words that have no vowels, the letter Y can serve as a vowel, for example in the word hymn. In ancient Semitic languages like Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic, the alphabet was originally purely consonantal, an abjad. The vowel sounds were passed on orally as children learned to read the words. Over time, scribes began using 4 specific letters to hint at vowel sounds. These are the mothers of reading, or Mater's lectionis. In Hebrew, these consonants are aleph, making a long A sound or an E sound, he, used at the end of a word for A or E, vav, used for O or U sounds, and yod, used for I or E sounds. So what might have started out as a pronunciation aid, a Mater's lectionis, may have been read as a full-blown consonant, making the word grave into deaths. Our vowels read as consonants. We can think of the evolution of the word as the stage 1, the text just had BMT, could be death or tomb. Stage 2, Dead Sea Scrolls, scribes added a vav to help with the O sound, so it became BMVT, then it was read as his death. And stage 3, the Masoretes, the scribes preserving a different tradition added a yod to indicate a plural, so it became BMTYV, so the word becomes his deaths. In the Babylonian Talmud, the servant of Isaiah 53 is often interpreted as an individual, specifically the Messiah. Sanhedrin 98a to b. This is the most famous passage. It records a discussion on the name of the Messiah. One opinion is that his name is the leper, citing Isaiah 53:4. Messiah ben Joseph. Some early rabbinic traditions identify this suffering figure with Messiah ben Joseph, a messianic figure who dies in battle before the arrival of the triumphant Messiah, Ben David. In this context, verse 9's reference to a grave with the wicked is seen as the literal death of his preliminary Messiah. Later rabbinic literature, medieval to modern, during the Middle Ages, particularly following the Crusades, and intensified Jewish-Christian polemics, the interpretation shifted decisively. The collective interpretation, Israel as the servant, most major medieval commentators, led by Rashi, 11th century, argued that the servant refers to the nation of Israel as a whole. Rashi interprets his grave with the wicked as the Jewish people being buried in exile among the Gentiles. The rich refers to the nations who oppress Israel while enjoying worldly wealth. Ibn Ezra noted that the plural in his deaths, bemotav, in the Hebrew text supports a collective reading, as it refers to the many deaths of Jews throughout various persecutions. Now, the Greek Septuagint, translated around the 3rd to 2nd century before Christ, offers a fascinating third path that differs from both the traditional Masoretic text and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the Greek text from Isaiah 53:9, the verse reads, Kaidoso tous ponirus anti tis taphis afto kai tous plusius anti tu thanatu autu. And I will give the wicked in place of his burial, and the rich in place of his death. Now, to understand why this translation matters, we have to look at how the Greek translators chose specific words. And I will give, kaidoso, the Greek is first person singular. There is no case, as this is a verb, in the first person singular future tense. In the context of Isaiah, this makes God the speaker, the one who will give. Now, the wicked, tous ponerus, this is plural. It isn't just one person, it's a category of people. It is in the accusative case, so the wicked take the action of the verb I will give. Now, in place of, which the Greek word is anti, this is the most important word in the sentence. In Greek, anti can mean instead of, in exchange for, or as a substitute for. You can think of the Antichrist as someone who is instead of Christ, or a substitute for Christ. And then we have his burial, tes taphes autu. This refers to the act or location of being buried. The case is genitive, so the burial belongs to him. Context tells us this is the servant who is buried. And then his death, to thanatu autu. Notably, this is singular in Greek, unlike the plural deaths found in the Hebrew Masoretic text. Again, the case is genitive. So why this translation is striking? The use of the word instead of, anti, creates a sense of divine exchange. In Hebrew Masoretic text, the verse sounds like a description of a funeral gone wrong. He was assigned a grave with the wicked. However, in this Greek translation, it sounds like a judgment or a ransom. God is saying that because of the servant's suffering, he will give the wicked and the rich as a sort of compensation or exchange for the servant's death and burial. It reframes the servant's death not as a tragedy, but as an event that has a price or an impact on the status of the wicked. Now, does this contradict atonement? Scholars generally look at the Greek preposition anti in two ways here. One is vindication, the payback view. In this interpretation, God is so pleased with the servant's sacrifice that he gives the wicked over to judgment as a response to the servant's death. It's not that the wicked are dying in the servant's place, rather their judgment is the result of the servant being glorified. And the other view is the exchange of honour. The rich being given for his death, the second half of the verse, is often linked to the New Testament account where Jesus, who died a shameful death, was given an honourable burial in a rich man's tomb, Joseph of Arimathea. In this case, God exchanges the expected shameful burial for an honourable one. And the New Testament connection. It's worth noting that when the New Testament writers like Peter or Matthew refer to Isaiah 53, they are almost always quoting this Greek version. A case can be made that this Greek translation helped shape the early Christian understanding of substitution, the idea that the servant's death involved an exchange between the innocent and the guilty. Now Mark 15 verses 43 to 47 in the King James Version reads, Joseph of Arimathea, an honourable counsellor, which also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate, and craved the body of Jesus. And Pilate marvelled if he were already dead, and calling him to the centurion, he asked him whether he had been any while dead. And when he knew it of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph. And he bought fine linen, and took him down, and wrapped him in the linen, and laid him in a sepulchre which was hewn out of rock, and rolled a stone unto the door of the sepulchre. And Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph beheld where he was laid. And Matthew 27:57 in the King James Version, when the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea, named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. Most biblical scholars agree that Matthew mentions Joseph's wealth specifically to signal to his readers that Isaiah 53:9, with the rich in his death, was being fulfilled. So assigned a grave versus buried with the rich. Because Jesus was executed as a state criminal, sandwiched between two thieves, the Roman and Jewish authorities fully intended for him to be buried in a common pit for criminals, the wicked. And Joseph of Arimathea's sudden arrival at Pilate's court disrupted that plan. He was assigned a shameful burial by his executioners, but in his death he ended up with the rich. Now the first half of the verse, he was assigned a grave with the wicked, is often linked to the crucifixion itself rather than just the burial. Mark 15:27, they crucified two rebels, or wicked criminals, with him, one on his right and one on his left. In the logic of the gospel writers, Jesus was assigned a criminal's death and a criminal's pit, but the assignment was overruled by the intervention of a rich man, Joseph of Arimathea. Now, parallelism in Hebrew poetry. In Hebrew poetry, authors often use parallelism, where two lines describe the same situation from different angles. So line A, he was assigned a grave with the wicked, his status as a condemned criminal, and line B, and with the rich in his death, his actual physical resting place. The prophecy predicts a paradox. He will be treated like a low-life criminal, yet receive the burial honours of the wealthy. Joseph of Arimathea is the bridge that allows both seemingly contradictory statements to come true at the same time. In conclusion, the theological tension between the Greek concept of the vindication of the servant in the Septuagint versus the suffering of the servant are both fulfilled in Jesus, As per the Hebrew, Jesus was indeed assigned a grave with the wicked, which is where his body would have been dumped along with the criminals he was crucified with, had it not been for the intervention of Joseph of Arimathea, who gave him a burial with the honours and glory of the rich. Thus Jesus, crucified as a criminal, was buried in a rich man's tomb. Yet at the same time, the rich and wicked will feel the shame of judgment when the vindicated Christ returns to judge the living and the dead. Okay, so these are just my lessons. If you have different lessons, please feel free to leave them in the comments. But the first lesson is trusting in God's overruling providence. Jesus was assigned a shameful grave with criminals, yet God intervened through Joseph of Arimathea to provide an honourable burial. This serves as a reminder that even when the world intends shame or defeat for us, God has the final word and can overrule human plans to bring about his purposes. And the second lesson, God provides what we need. At his death, all Jesus had was his clothes, which were divided up among the Roman soldiers. Yet God moved the heart of Joseph of Arimathea to provide him a nobleman's burial. Though poor and humble and crucified with the wicked, and intended for a criminal's burial in a pit outside Jerusalem, Jesus ended up in a lavish burial clothes and nice burial spot in a sepulchre. And the next lesson is the power of quiet faithfulness. Joseph of Arimathea is described as a bridge that allowed contradictory prophecies to be fulfilled. Devotionally, this encourages us that even behind the scenes acts of service, like providing a tomb, can play a pivotal role in God's grand narrative. And the key takeaway from all of this is from shame to splendour. Jesus was stripped of everything, dying the death of a wicked man in our place. While the authorities intended to dump his body into a common grave with criminals, God intervened. In his burial, we see a glimpse of our own future. Jesus' shamed and debased body was claimed by a rich man, wrapped in fine linen, and laid to rest in a nobleman's tomb. This is the divine exchange. Though we deserve to stand at the judgment in the tattered rags of our sin, because of Christ, our shame is removed. We are clothed instead in the gleaming white robes of his righteousness, and welcomed into one of the many mansions of the Lord. Okay, I hope you found that helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will look forward to hearing from you in the comments. And if I don't hear from you in your comments, I will see you in tomorrow's video.